Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, a free site, bettingangle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. You know what? In sports, sometimes politics takes over. Sometimes the mood in the room, rightly or wrongly, is biased, and it leads to outcomes that are hard to explain. Let me talk about one such outcome that is going to happen, and it's ahead of us. You have a guy who hit 41% of his threes. 41%. He averaged 1.8 steals a game. The other big numbers he averaged a triple double. 12.7 rebounds a game, 10.2 assists a game, and of course 29.6 points per game. He has the best stat line in the National Basketball Association this year. But the mood in the room is against him. It's not to give him the MVP because he's already won 3. So, Joker of the Denver Nuggets, who sunk me yesterday, quite frankly. I thought the Clippers would win that game. Right? He's going to finish second in the MVP voting to Shea, Gilgeous-Alexander. And I'm convinced years from now we're going to look back and we're going to wonder what people were thinking then. Just like we wonder how Karl Malone beat a guy on a team with the best record in the league, who was a better defender than Karl Malone, and who was the scoring champion, Michael Jordan, for MVP years ago. Well, let's talk about the NFL draft. You know what? I need for people to understand that Shedeur Sanders is one of the luckiest guys to come out of the NFL draft. He truly is blessed because of what happened. Now, we don't know how good Shedeur is going to be in the pros. Understand, half of the quarterbacks taken in the first 2 rounds really don't pan out. But understand, if you're in the world of jerseys, if you're in the world of buying gear that's connected to an athlete, right, sneakers, then just understand, Shedeur Sanders right now is A-list. Right, the other day I was in a bar, sports bar, and some guy, in fact, I was in a sports bar for the NFL draft, and some guy sitting in the bar was wearing a 49er jersey. Now, understand, every other 49er jersey out here is either Montana or Rice. This guy had an exotic one. He was wearing a Terrell Owens jersey. Now, let me just say, I know people are outraged about people in the NFL draft slipping. Right? Nothing is more outrageous, and I mean nothing in sports, than an obvious Hall of Famer getting passed over. Than you understanding that there's a group out there that hates the guy, and even though the guy was one of the best wide receivers ever, right? They tried to convince us for multiple years that he wasn't worthy of being voted in the Hall of Fame. So I saw the guy's jersey and I thought, whoa, that's interesting, right? So you know the rest. Later, I was walking through the bar and I walked by the guy. I had to nod my head at him just to let the guy know, hey, player, we're on the same page here. That T.O. Hall of Fame vote was a joke at first, right? Obviously, T.O. eventually made it in the Hall of Fame because, understand, it was so ridiculous that the Hall of Fame risked discrediting itself if it didn't admit T.O., right? You're not even talking about the controversy in baseball where, we're supposed to believe that anyone suspected of taking PEDs doesn't belong in the hall, which is littered with people who took greenies, amphetamines, chewed tobacco while they were playing baseball and stuff like that, right? But just understand, life's unfair. So if, and it's a big if Shedeur Sanders, who is so lucky that he has ended up in a division that might have the best set of quarterbacks in the league as a division, right? If Aaron Rodgers stops this ridiculous game of, I'm not sure if I'm going to play next year, right? If he actually joins the Steelers, folks, you have a two-time MVP in Lamar Jackson in the same division as four-time MVP Aaron Rodgers. You have Joe Burrow in that division. And who's the fourth team, folks? It's Shedeur Sanders' new team. Now, let's be real here. I know they're not reporting it this way in the press. You need to realize that the press has limitations, right? If you want the truth, you have to actually do your own research in addition to hearing from press people. In my opinion, the best quarterback on the Browns is Joe Flacco. I think Flacco's underrated, right? The problem with Flacco is when it goes south in a hurry, right? He's kind of like Jameis Winston, where you see him some days, you say, wow, that Flacco's good. You see him other days, you're wondering how he's in the league, right? But Joe Flacco, to me, is the best quarterback on the roster. I need for folks to understand that the pickup of Shedeur Sanders wasn't a need pickup, because Cleveland has a guy who I believe is ready to pop. I know that we view life as winners versus everyone else. You and I know life's not like that. You have people like Geno Smith, the quarterback of the Raiders, who come out, face some adversity, wasn't quite top of the line, then learned from the sidelines, right? Learned from limited action in games, has made himself into a quarterback who has one of the highest completion percentages in the league, right? A quarterback who the Raiders hire his old coach, who of course is a future Hall of Famer, and then they go out and trade for him. And of course, one of the owners of the Raiders is Tom Brady, one of the best to ever play the position. Well, understand, that's the way life often breaks, right? Some guy's promising but doesn't quite win the lotto early, but the guy's learning. By the time the guy gets to his late 20s, early 30s, things start to make sense. The defense slows down. The guy starts to be successful. Now, Cleveland has a guy on its roster who I believe is ready to pop. He's going to be 27 this year. Understand, I watched a game last year where the starter got hurt. This guy came in. And this guy was on the verge of beating the Commanders when Devontae Smith dropped the pass that would have ended the game. Then, of course, Jaden Daniels, his magic, won the game for Washington. Right? You do research on Kenny Pickett, and you'll be astonished. You'll find out that Kenny, who, we don't view as winning the lotto, is a young guy who actually has a 15-10 record, above 500 record, as a starting quarterback in the National Football League. Right? He's 15-10 as a starter. He's on Cleveland's roster. I'm not sure if Shedeur Sanders is going to be as good as Kenny Pickett, who is rapidly picking up the game. Let's get real controversial here. I'm a Pac-12 guy, right? Pac-12, rest in peace. There's going to be a new Pac-12, but it's not going to be the old Pac-12. You know, I privately feel the best quarterbacks in the league for some time have been out of the Pac-12, including Aaron Rodgers, right? Well, there's a guy who was coached by Dan Lanning, the same guy at Oregon who coached Bo Nix, right? Bo's last game, for those keeping track, was a playoff game, his rookie year. Well, the guy who replaced Bo Nix at Oregon is a guy named Dillon Gabriel, right, folks? Over a 70 completion percentage, 30 touchdowns, 6 picks. Cleveland picked him up in the third round. Right, so what I'm telling you is that Shedeur Sanders has two guys who are definitely better than him. I'll take Flacco and I'll take Kenny Pickett over him. Understand, Flacco today probably has a stronger arm than Shedeur Sanders, right, who I think is very promising, right? Then there's a young guy coming out into the NFL draft this year with Shedeur, who might be better than him, Dillon Gabriel, right? So Shedeur has his work cut out for him. But because Shedeur was Mel Kiper's best available player for more than 40 hours in this draft, right? Because Colorado Buffalo football was dead in the water. Then they picked up Shedeur Sanders, and of course his dad, Dion. And of course they then started winning games because there's a Mike Pritchard crowd out there, right, saying, hey, we're relevant again, in part because of this guy. Because there's a group out there who saw all of these prospects. And I know there's a segment of society that hates this, but understand there's a segment of society that loves this, right? I saw Shedeur Sanders, I saw all this gold and stuff like that. I privately thought to myself, okay, Shedeur, isn't quite in sync with this NFL corporate world, right? But at the same time, I thought, this young guy's keeping it real, right? This young guy is trying to get by on his talent, not fitting in socially, right? Because there's the group out there like me who will, walk by a guy wearing a TO jersey and nod his head, right? Let the guy know, look, man, we both know there are a lot of haters out there on TO, but we both know he's one of the best wide receivers we've seen in our life, right? There's a crowd looking at Shedeur and saying, look, I don't know if Shedeur is better than Cam Ward, guy who went first in the draft. I can't say with certainty whether he's better than Dillon Gabriel, right? But what I can say is, wow, him sliding out of the first round, him sliding out of the second round, the third round, the fourth round, something's not right. Right? He's getting dissed in part because of some, off the field perception thing that other guys aren't facing. Right? So let me just say this. If Shedeur can make the Browns, can actually get in a game, and can actually flash some high upside potential, I'm just telling you, in my opinion, he's going to have one of the top 5 selling jerseys in the National Football League. Right? There are going to be a lot of people buying the jersey who barely know who Shedeur Sanders is, but who understand that he represents resilience. Right? Folks, I'd rather be Shedeur Sanders than Cam Ward. I know Cam is going to be cashing a much bigger check from the NFL. Understand, Shedeur is already capitalized. Right? Shedeur's not broke. Right? Shedeur's your friend from college who isn't paying back student loans. Right? Whose car is paid off. He's not broke. But nonetheless, he represents a guy who many people feel was passed over. Many people feel was part of a double standard here. Many people feel was frowned upon in part because there's some haters on Dion, his father. Right? So just understand, this is where capitalism takes over. Forget the media narrative and stuff like that. Forget all these ridiculous narratives. This is where entrepreneurs are going to step in. This is where entrepreneurs are going to say, gee, is there going to be a market for Shedeur Sanders merchandise, jerseys? How popular is he going to be? How much upside does he really have? Right? This group's not going to be interested in, whether Shedeur combs his hair, whether Shedeur is using the right word choice in interviews, whether Shedeur knows how to play the game, come across well in an interview, make eye contact, sit upright. This group doesn't care anything about that. Right? This group has a more basic question. Can he play? If the answer is yes, then years from now, you're going to have some guy in a sports bar wearing a Shedeur Sanders jersey. And he'll be walking by some other guy in that sports bar, and that other guy's going to nod at him because they're both going to know that the man behind that Shedeur Sanders jersey can play. Right? I think Shedeur is going to make the league. Cleveland looks like they have talent to trade. Right? If I were an opposing team and my quarterback core was a little bit thin, I'd be calling up Cleveland and I would say, hey, look, talk to us about Kenny Pickett. Right? Pickett, by the way, for those who don't know, was a gunslinger in college. Right? This is the guy who enters the league, is 15-10 as a starter, didn't meet some people's expectations, is forgotten. Right? If I were a rival team, I would call up, I'd say, hey, talk to us about Kenny. If Cleveland knows what they have, they might say, no, we're not going to talk about Kenny. Well, we might talk to you about Dylan or Shedeur. Right? I'd be calling Cleveland right now. And I would understand when I call, if these guys actually have played in preseason games and have shown flashes, that I might have to pay more than what Cleveland spent to get these guys in the draft and through trade. Right? I thought the Kenny Pickett trade was ridiculous. I thought they fleeced Philly. Dylan Gabriel was a steal in the 3rd round. Shedeur's a steal in the 5th round. Right? Cleveland, let's just say they worked it. Just understand, I'm not going to feel too sorry for Shedeur Sanders, given that there's a demand side out there who knows who he is, who understands that he completed more than 70% of his passes. I thought the highlights that Mel Kiper showed when Shedeur got drafted said it all, right? Shakur's hitting guys in the middle of coverage, right? There's a high, there's a low. His guy's in the middle. He has the touch to get it to the guy. Right? If he has the game, the market will take care of him even while he's under a rookie contract. Let's see how it turns out. Right? Sadly, let me say this too. Going back to the NBA. I'm a big Bill Russell fan. Russell, the man, is even more impressive than Russell, the player. But if you average over 50 points per game in an NBA season, what they need to call you at the end of the season is MVP. Right? It's absurd to me. It's just part of the legend that is Wilt Chamberlain. It's absurd to me that Wilt Chamberlain could average 50 a game and not win the MVP. Right? Unfortunately, that's the world we live in. Joker. is about to average, well, did average a triple-double with 40% three-point shooting and 1.8 steals per game, and he's about to lose the MVP to an excellent player. Like Karl Malone, Shea Alexander is an excellent player. I'm not here to say otherwise. He's not the MVP this year. The MVP is Joker, right? You know, Joker's about to get ripped off years from now. I thought Joker was ripped off when Joel Embiid was given the MVP. Years from now, we're going to look back, we're going to be scratching our heads. Just like we might be scratching our heads about how a talent like Shedeur Sanders could slip to the 5th round. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. Feel free to disagree with me about anything. T.O., Joker, NBA MVP, Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, Dan Lanning, etc. Thanks for stopping by.